On a moonless night, high in the Afghan mountains, a lone predator trains his sights on an unsuspecting target. His muscles tense in preparation to strike when a sudden burst of light reveals his position. Unveiled by the flash of a camera trap, the snow leopard slips silently away, disappearing into its mountain hideaway. But the hunter is also being hunted. U.S. troops fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan are now being trained to confront a new enemy: the illegal trade in endangered species. Wildlife products made from threatened and endangered species like the snow leopard are readily available on U.S. military bases and in local markets in Iraq and Afghanistan. Unfortunately, military personnel are being lured into buying these items, which cannot be legally transported across international borders. In too many countries, placing the word wildlife in front of the word crime lessened its impact. Wild animals have been dubbed the new blood diamonds, as their capture, slaughter, and trade around the world provides money for more lethal activities. This illicit enterprise threatens not only the planet's wildlife, but also funds violence, murder, civil war, human and drug trafficking in troubled countries. Today, law enforcement agencies find the same organized crime groups that smuggle weapons and drugs increasingly involved with the trade in illegal wildlife. No one knows for certain how large the wildlife trade is, but it is estimated in the billions of dollars, following only arms and drugs in scale. Few smugglers are ever caught, and penalties are often no more than a slap on the wrist. Hidden and unpunished, wildlife trafficking may be the world's most profitable trade in the illegal marketplace. Now, the Department of Defense and the Wildlife Conservation Society have joined forces to combat this threat. Meeting the Department of Defense mission worldwide requires safeguarding the natural systems that provide crucial support for combat readiness and protecting the essential environmental systems that ensure our nation's quality of life. Just as the military protects national security interests, the Wildlife Conservation Society is committed to protecting the planet's wildlife and wild places for future generations. With more than 500 projects in 60 countries around the globe, WCS operates in many of the same places as the U.S. military. Working together, the Wildlife Conservation Society and the Department of Defense can provide crucial intelligence about wildlife and wildlife issues that could affect the mission.
A soldier doesn't want to purchase things that's going to help a black market that actually helps a terrorist organization fund itself. If we're allowing our soldiers to purchase things on the black market that's going to help fund an insurgency to give a better message, that also plays with our security back home.
Iraq and Afghanistan may be thought of primarily as combat zones, but both have a surprising diversity of plants, animals, and landscapes. While primarily desert, Iraq contains a variety of habitats including wetlands, coastal areas, forests, and plains. Craggy, snow-capped peaks dominate Afghanistan's landscape, but the country also holds forests, grasslands, and wetlands. After decades of civil unrest, few people associate these countries with wildlife. But these fledgling democracies are home to a surprising array of species, including hyenas, wolves, jackals, bears, birds of prey, and 9 species of wild cat. King among these cats is the snow leopard. Their long, powerful tails make up half their body length, and provide balance for jumping, an important survival skill in steep and rocky habitat. As magnificent as they are rare, the snow leopard population in Afghanistan alone numbers less than 100, with a mere 3,000 left worldwide. A single snow leopard skin can fetch as much as $1,000 on the open market, 3 times the annual salary of an Afghan worker. Whether the snow leopard is directly hunted or faced with reduced habitat and prey, its small population means the loss of a single snow leopard has a significant impact on its survival as a species. Now, military police trained by the Wildlife Conservation Society regularly conduct sweeps of vendors displaying and selling illegal wildlife products on U.S. military bases around Kabul, Afghanistan.
Sometimes a mink coat will be kind of thin, but that's because they're using summer pelts.
When we first got here, I was absolutely blind. And coming here into country and actually seeing it firsthand has been quite the eye-opener. And as a matter of fact, it's actually made me take it a lot more seriously myself.
Products include furniture made from wildlife parts, fur coats or clothing made from pelts and skins, and taxidermy animals. Figurines carved from ivory or knives with handles inlaid with bone and ivory.
This one right here is bone.
Are widely available. These items are most likely entering the country on black market trade routes that supply illegal ammunitions and drugs. In a sad twist, the defenders are also part of the problem. While many species have survived years of conflict, wildlife face unlikely pressure from the very people charged with rebuilding. Contractors and the military community are actually driving the trade in rare and endangered wildlife in Iraq and Afghanistan.
It would be dreadful if the legacy of the American involvement in Afghanistan were that of extinction of a species. That doesn't help toward nation building. We'd like nation building to be both building of the economy, building of the natural resources, and preserving the characteristics of that country and the various environmental attributes that country has to offer to the world.
Purchasing wildlife products drives up demand, and the seller will replace any item of inventory that sells well. This leads to increased exploitation of rare and endangered wildlife.
Some military personnel may think that because the animal is already dead, it's okay for me to buy it. But the reality is, if they purchase a product made from a species that's rare and endangered, the local vendor is just going to replace that product with another similar product. And so whether the vendor is the one who goes out and shoots the next animal or somebody else goes out and shoots the next animal, it's just fueling the demand.
The Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, commonly called CITES, is an agreement between 175 countries, which ensures that the international trade in wild animals and plants does not threaten their survival. Afghanistan is a signatory to CITES, and working with the Wildlife Conservation Society, has already protected 48 species. In Iraq, monitoring the illegal wildlife trade is a work in progress. Staff of the local conservation organization, Nature Iraq, are actively working with the Iraqi government to become a signatory to CITES and to draft legislation that will protect local species. The U.S. enforces CITES through the Endangered Species Act, which forbids federal agencies from jeopardizing threatened species. The Lacey Act is another important U.S. law that requires all U.S. citizens to abide by wildlife laws of the country they are in, as well as the U.S. laws. Military personnel are not exempt from these laws. Violations can result in fines of up to $250,000 and up to 20 years in prison.
If it's restricted or it's on the endangered list, we seize it. And if it's violating federal law, then they could potentially run into some big money fines and arrests back in the States for even possessing some of the furs that are being sold here in the country.
Service members may also be subject to punishment under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, which could include loss of pay and loss of rank.
If something is seized and it is understood that it's been intentionally purchased with the intent of transporting it back to the United States, then they are subject to the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and their command is notified. So it could jeopardize a soldier's entire career.
Where are you guys based out of?
Many legal souvenirs are available in local markets, such as carpets, artwork, jewelry, shawls, or other crafts. It is important to choose these types of products when selecting gifts and souvenirs to bring home for friends and family. There's also evidence that saving wildlife in these countries can provide significant revenue once peace is secured.
The Wildlife Conservation Society has worked in many countries with a lot of conflict, and one example is in Rwanda, where we had worked prior to the genocide to establish a mountain gorilla tourism project where people from all over the world would come to Rwanda and go into the Virunga Mountains to see mountain gorillas. And this made an incredible amount of money for the local communities. And because the local communities recognized the importance of that resource, the local communities helped to protect the gorillas, and they were able to rely on international tourism to again boost their economy, and that is still thriving today.
Establishing parks and protected areas may be another way to rebuild the economy in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. Working closely with the Afghan government, the Wildlife Conservation Society recently helped establish the country's first national park in Afghanistan's central Bamiyan province. Once home to towering Buddha statues that were destroyed by the Taliban in 2001. Today, this historic province is slowly rebuilding. With spectacular crystal blue lakes emerging from a stark, moon-like landscape, Bandi Amir National Park is of global importance and is currently being considered for World Heritage Site status.
Tourism is one of the greatest potential for Bamiyan. Of course, this value or potential for tourism, that it's not only for the historical heritage, but the natural heritage is also very important, and the landscape of Bamiyan is a great potential for tourism. We want to combine the environment and conservation with the historical and promote ecotourism in Bamiyan.
Economics are not the only driver for effective management of natural resources. Global security is a key interest as well.
In many places around the world, populations are very much dependent on their local natural resources. They're dependent on them for food, they're dependent on them to feed their livestock, they're dependent on them for just basic survival. And so if the resources are depleted, then you're depleting a way for local people to survive. And if they don't have a way to survive, then they're going to turn to whatever other means they can to earn money for their family and for their community.
For millennia, trade in products made from wildlife has been a legitimate and lucrative livelihood in all cultures. Today, in places where wildlife trade is well regulated, systems and good governance are in place to ensure species are not over-harvested. In the United States, deer and duck hunting are well-managed activities that provide sustenance and, in some cases, livelihoods for many Americans. However, in places that lack effective regulation and monitoring of wildlife populations, indiscriminate hunting results in devastating effects to the animal populations and can destroy any future potential for economic gain from quota or trophy hunting. Unregulated trade can also have unintended consequences for human health. 60% of all disease affecting mankind is zoonotic, meaning it can jump between animals and humans. Ebola, AIDS, West Nile virus, anthrax, and monkeypox can all be transmitted through contact with illegally traded wildlife. Whether captured for pet, clothing, trophy, meat, or medicine, many species are on the brink of extinction. As long as there is demand, animals will continue to be killed. The bald eagle and the American bison are our cultural icons and symbols of our national pride. It's unthinkable to imagine losing them to poachers.
Both of those species in our country were on the brink of extinction, but we brought them back, and we did so because we want those species here. They're part of us, they're part of our culture, and it's the same for anybody else in the world.
Wildlife doesn't recognize boundaries, border crossings, travel restrictions, or political unrest. And neither must conservation. Whether you're motivated to act by environmental, cultural, or security concerns, we all have a role to play in ending the illegal wildlife trade. The threats are real. Biodiversity loss endangers the mission and jeopardizes chances for post-conflict recovery for communities who depend upon natural resources for survival. Don't lose your money, your health, your career, or your freedom by supporting criminal activity. Combating the illegal wildlife trade is not easy, but it is possible. All it takes is increased awareness and enforcement. The simple act of not buying products made from wildlife is something you can do to protect yourself and the world while serving overseas for the military. If you see or suspect illegal wildlife trade or products, report it to your chain of command. The survival of some of the most amazing animals on Earth depends on you. The time to act is now.